Long before Egypt became Egypt, before dynasties, crowns, or hieroglyphs, there was only the river, the stars, and the silence. The ancient ones called it Kemet, the Black Land, not for its darkness but for its fertile power. The deep, rich soil along the Nile wasn't just earth. It was womb. It was memory. It was code. Kemet wasn't simply a place. It was a frequency. From this soil rose a civilization that would shape the spiritual architecture of the planet for thousands of years to come. But unlike the modern world, Egypt didn't separate the sacred from the scientific, the spiritual from the societal. For them, everything was divine. The land, the language, the stars, even breath. The Nile River was more than a life source. It was the terrestrial reflection of the Milky Way, flowing from south to north, the opposite of most rivers. The Nile symbolized the soul's journey from matter to spirit, from the root to the crown. Its flooding wasn't seen as a natural event, but a cosmic heartbeat. The breath of the gods. Ancient priests would map the rising and falling of the river alongside the movement of the stars. This is why the Egyptian year began with the heliacal rising of Sirius, Sopdet, the brightest star in the sky, associated with Isis, the divine mother. Her return to the sky marked the moment the Nile would flood, bringing life to the land. This synchronicity was no accident. The Egyptians believed that the macrocosm and the microcosm were reflections, that as above, so below wasn't a poetic phrase, but a law of nature. A civilization from the stars? Many ancient traditions suggest that Egypt didn't evolve in isolation, but inherited knowledge from an earlier, far older source. The Zep Tepi, the first time, is described in temple texts as a golden age, when the gods walked with humanity. This wasn't metaphor. It was memory. According to the mystery schools, these gods were not mythological figures, but interdimensional beings, energies, intelligences, perhaps even extraterrestrial mentors. Some came from Sirius, others from Orion, and some from beyond the veil of known perception. They came not to rule, but to teach, not to enslave, but to seed something. The story of Osiris, Isis, Thoth, and Horus is far more than myth. It is a cosmic map embedded with codes about human ascension, death, and rebirth, and the divine blueprint of the soul. Every temple was built according to these star maps. The pyramids at Giza aligned with the belt of Orion, Dendera aligned with Sirius. Abydos preserved the mystery of resurrection. But who could build with such precision? Who knew how to quarry 100-ton stones and place them with no mortar, no error? The answer may lie in vibration, in sound, in frequency. The ancient Egyptians didn't build with brute force. They built with resonance. Sound was sacred. Words were spells. The right vibration, they believed, could move matter. And they were right. Long before dynasties rose and temples were carved, there was only river and sky, silence and breath. Egypt, or as the ancients called it, Kemet, the Black Land, was not black from darkness but from life, from the fertile soil born of the Nile's sacred flooding. To the people of this land, nature was not a backdrop. It was a living spirit, a divine intelligence. The earth was mother, the stars were memory, and every grain of sand held a story written in light. To live in Kemet was to exist in relationship with the cosmos. The Nile itself mirrored the stars above. Its unique flow from south to north reflected a sacred directionality, the journey of the soul, not downward into earth, but upward into spirit. The people believed that the river flowed not just with water, but with the pulse of the divine. Each flood was not disaster nor coincidence, but a heartbeat from the stars, synchronizing the rhythms of earth with the higher dimensions. They did not wait for science to teach them this. They felt it. They knew it in their bones, in their dreams, in the soft whisper of wind across desert stones. This is why the heliacal rising of Sirius was revered, not as astronomy but as prophecy. The return of the star goddess signaled renewal, life reborn, memory restored. This was not ritual. It was resonance. And what of their origins? Even among the ancient texts and temple inscriptions, there is a mysterious echo of something older, a time before the pharaohs, a time before the land had names. The Zep-Tepi, the first time, the golden age when divine beings walked among humans and shared sacred knowledge. Some called them gods, but others whisper that they were teachers from beyond the veil, keepers of cosmic order, masters of frequency, guides from Sirius and Orion. Their appearance wasn't myth, it was memory, compressed and encoded into the stories of Osiris, Isis, Horus, and Thoth. They didn't come to conquer, but to anchor. Their purpose was not to control, but to activate, to awaken the latent codes within the human soul, to plant seeds of consciousness that would grow over millennia. And so the great temples were constructed, not for worship, but for alignment, each one precisely placed according to stellar configurations. The pyramids were not tombs. They were frequency generators, consciousness amplifiers, spiritual tuning forks resonating with cosmic vibrations. Stone to the Egyptians was not dead matter. It was alive, able to hold charge, memory, and intention. They carved it not just to honor the gods, but to encode sound and energy. The entire land became a map of multidimensional navigation. Dendera hummed with the energy of Sirius. Abydos echoed with resurrection codes. Giza stood silent and eternal, yet deeply alive with cosmic fire, and in the heart of every monument lived the same truth: as above, so below. The macrocosm mirrored in the microcosm, humanity reflecting divinity. The pharaohs were not kings in the way we think of kings. They were bridges, living nodes between earth and the higher planes. Their purpose was not political, but metaphysical. Their initiation was not just ceremonial, it was a death and rebirth, a transformation into a being who could hold the divine frequency without distortion. They were trained in the temples, places hidden from the uninitiated where sound and silence, breath and vibration were used not to instruct but to transform. Egypt understood what the modern world forgot: that the soul is not born in flesh but incarnates through layers of frequency. That to be human is not to be limited but to be layered. That memory is not held in the brain, but in the field around the body, what they called the Ka, the Ba, the Ak. Subtle bodies, each with their own role, purpose, and portal. The priests and priestesses were not religious functionaries. They were initiates of light, trained to read the language of symbol, to feel the pulse of the stars, to channel the instructions embedded within sacred sound. They fasted not to impress the gods, but to clear their own fields. They sang not to entertain, but to calibrate. They spoke in hymns because they understood. Words shape worlds. And beneath all of this lived a single understanding: that death was not the end. Death was a corridor. The West, where the sun disappeared, was not a place of fear, but of transformation. The body returned to earth, but the soul journeyed through gates and tests, weighed not by morality, but by resonance. The feather of Ma'at was not symbolic. It was a literal measure of harmony. If the soul was light, if it had lived in balance, it passed into higher realms. If not, it returned, not as punishment, but as refinement. This entire cosmology wasn't imposed on the people. It was lived, breathed, embedded in every aspect of daily life. To eat was a sacrament, to walk was a pilgrimage, to speak was an act of creation, to dream was to travel. Even the art was functional, each image, glyph, and proportion designed with sacred math to open the eye of the soul. Nothing was random. Every line had purpose. Every temple corridor curved in accordance with star movement, light direction, and the needs of the initiate. They didn't build for comfort. They built for transmission. So how did they know? How did a civilization thousands of years ago possess such precision, such clarity, such harmony between the seen and unseen? Because they remembered. They carried within them the echoes of an even older time, when light had form, when sound created matter, when humanity still walked in conscious partnership with the stars. They remembered who we truly are and what Earth was meant to be. And though the desert may have swallowed their cities, though the dynasties rose and fell, though sand and wind may have worn away their names, the vibration remains, etched in stone, encoded in myth, dormant in the collective soul, until we are ready to remember again. And you, reading these words, are part of that remembrance. It is said that time in Kemet did not move in a straight line. It spiraled. The ancients did not think of the past as something behind them. The past was above, closer to the stars. The deeper into memory one journeyed, the higher one rose in vibration. And thus to remember was to ascend. Forgetting, on the other hand, was a fall, not of morality but of frequency. And in this model, history was not a collection of events. It was a stairway of soul expansion. This is why the temples of Egypt were built as maps of the human body. Each structure represented aspects of consciousness: the root, the heart, the third eye, the crown. A person walking through a temple was not visiting a building, but activating themselves. The geometry of the space, the sound resonance, the alignment with stars. All of it was designed to return the seeker to alignment with their divine essence. This was not metaphorical. It was functional spirituality. Initiates would begin at the outer courtyards, symbolic of the material world. As they progressed inward, they passed through increasingly subtle chambers. At each threshold, they left behind attachments to body, to ego, to identity, until in the innermost sanctuary there was nothing left but stillness. And in that silence, the divine could be heard. This journey mirrored the annual flooding of the Nile. As the waters rose and receded, they brought life, not just to the land, but to the soul. The rhythm of nature was not watched from a distance. It was lived from within. The priesthood aligned themselves not with calendars, but with cosmic timing. Their rituals were not random. They followed celestial alignments, solar gates, and lunar pulses. They knew that certain days opened certain doorways, and that sound could only be sung when the stars were ready to receive it. There was no separation between science and spirit. The measurement of time, space, weight, and energy was the measurement of divine harmony. The Eye of Horus wasn't just a symbol. It encoded fractions of sacred mathematics. The angles of pyramid slopes weren't guesses. They corresponded to solar geometry and the golden ratio. The scribes were not merely record keepers. They were carriers of frequency through written form. The hieroglyph was not a letter. It was a spell. And within all of this was the principle of Ma'at, the sacred law of balance, justice, and cosmic order. Ma'at was not a goddess to be worshipped, but a state to be lived. She was truth personified. In her presence, nothing false could survive. The ancient Egyptians built their entire civilization around this principle. Every structure, every agreement, every ceremony had to resonate with Ma'at. If it did not, it was considered unworthy, unstable, unsustainable. Harmony wasn't optional, it was law. To walk in Ma'at was to be in tune with the divine design. This is why pharaohs were not allowed to rule simply because of bloodline. They had to undergo initiation. They had to prove themselves worthy of holding the frequency. Power without Ma'at was not power. It was distortion. And distortion in Kemet was the greatest danger of all, because they understood that the most dangerous force was not war. It was forgetfulness. Forgetting who you are. Forgetting why you came. Forgetting the sacred geometry of your own soul. And so, everything in Egypt served the act of remembrance. The statues, larger than life, reminded people of the divine proportions of the soul. The colossal temples reminded them of the infinite. The golden sarcophagi reminded them that death was only a doorway, and the stars, always the stars, then reminded them that they were not from here. Not entirely. They were from above, from before, from forever. This is why spiritual seekers today feel called to Egypt. It is not tourism. It is activation. Something in the bones remembers. Something in the heart stirs. You walk into a ruined temple and feel your body vibrate, not from awe, but from recognition. You touch the stones and something within you whispers, "You've been here before." Because Kemet never died, it simply shifted frequency. The wisdom was never lost, only hidden, veiled until the time was right. And now, as humanity begins to awaken from its long amnesia, the gates begin to open once more. The records etched into stone were never for the eyes alone. They were for the soul, the same soul you carry now. The same vibration that once studied the stars from the banks of the Nile, that once chanted in candlelit temples, that once lay in sarcophagus not to die but to be reborn. To understand the sacred origins of Kemet is to understand the sacred origins of yourself. You are not a modern being looking back in time. You are an eternal soul slowly remembering forward. And Kemet is not behind you. It is above you, waiting, watching, calling you home. To the ancient Egyptians, the divine was not distant. It was present in every grain of sand, every current of wind, every heartbeat. Their gods were not abstract figures residing in some unreachable heaven. They were expressions of cosmic principles, forces of consciousness woven into the very fabric of reality. These divine beings were called the Neteru, often mistranslated as gods. But the word Nater meant something far more subtle, something closer to vibration, principle, archetype, or frequency. The Neteru were not beings to be worshipped blindly. They were laws to be embodied, forces to be aligned with, and mirrors of the soul's infinite facets. Each Nater carried a specific frequency and governed a particular aspect of life and creation. Isis, the Divine Mother, was not merely a mythic queen, but the principle of unconditional love, healing, and intuition. Osiris represented resurrection, inner order, and the cosmic memory embedded in all living things. Horus, their child, was the awakened eye, the unified self that sees both shadow and light. Set, often misunderstood as evil, embodied chaos, necessary destruction, the initiator of transformation. Thoth, the keeper of wisdom, held the codes of sacred language, geometry, time, and multidimensional perception. These were not mere stories. They were vibrational maps of the soul's journey through polarity, trauma, awakening, and return. The Neteru were ever present, not just in statues and carvings, but in the very structure of life. When a scribe wrote, he channeled Thoth. When a mother gave birth, she was held in the arms of Hathor. When the sun rose, it was Ra in his morning bark sailing across the celestial sea. Each act, each breath, each choice was seen as a communion with a greater archetype. There was no separation between human and divine, only degrees of remembrance. The temples of Egypt were more than places of worship. They were technologies of initiation. Each temple was dedicated to a Nater and built in accordance with that deity's vibration. The architecture encoded specific proportions, colors, symbols, and sound resonances. When an initiate entered such a space, they were entering a living field. The temple itself would begin to adjust their frequency. One did not learn about the gods by reading texts, but by walking through their fields, by merging one's energy with theirs, by embodying their essence through breath, sound, and silence. To approach the Neteru was not to pray for favors, but to become them. The priests and priestesses did not merely serve the gods. They became channels for their energy. Through fasting, purification, and disciplined practice, they aligned themselves with the vibration of the Nater they served. When they sang, it was the voice of the principle expressing itself through human form. When they spoke prophecy, it was the divine law resounding through the vessel of an awakened being. This process of alignment was known as divine embodiment. The human being was seen as a temple of light composed of multiple energy bodies. The goal was to raise one's vibration until each body, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, was aligned with Ma'at, the cosmic law of truth and balance. In this state, one could become a living expression of a nature, carrying divine codes into the material world. These individuals were not worshipped but revered as living reminders of what every soul could become. What modern eyes see as polytheism was in truth sacred science. The Neteru were not multiple gods competing for power. They were facets of one source, infinite consciousness expressing itself through archetypal frequencies. Like rays from the same sun, each Neter held a part of the whole. The ancient priests understood that to access divine knowledge, one must study the language of resonance. They knew that sound, color, geometry, and proportion were keys to unlocking higher states of consciousness. And so they built an entire civilization around these truths. Even the human body was mapped according to the Neteru. Each organ, each emotion, each stage of life corresponded to a divine frequency. Illness was not merely physical, it was energetic dissonance, a disruption in the harmony between self and source. Healing, therefore, was a return to alignment, a remembrance of divine order. The role of the healer was not to fix, but to reattune. The most profound aspect of this system was that it was not closed. One did not need to be born into a priestly bloodline to access the divine. One needed only to be willing to remember, to surrender, to purify the vessel. The mystery schools of Egypt accepted those ready to serve. Through decades of initiation, meditation, ritual, and silence, these initiates became bridges between dimensions. They were not seeking power. They were becoming stewards of harmony. The most sacred mystery, hidden even from many priests, was that all the Neteru existed within. Every soul contained the codes of Isis and Osiris, the light of Ra, the wisdom of Thoth, the vision of Horus, the challenge of Set. The journey of the initiate was not to worship external beings, but to awaken these inner forces and bring them into conscious balance. This is why spiritual seekers today are drawn to Egyptian symbols, often without understanding why. The Eye of Horus, the Scarab, the Ankh. They are not just decorations, they are activation keys. They carry within them vibrations that speak to the soul beneath the conscious mind. A modern person may wear an Ankh necklace and feel peace, not knowing they are tuning into the eternal life current that animates all things. The codes are still alive, still resonating, still calling, and they are calling louder now, because the earth is again at a turning point, and the ancient future is returning. The Neteru are not relics of a forgotten past. They are archetypal forces within the collective consciousness, re-emerging as humanity begins to shed layers of illusion. As more souls awaken, the inner temples open. As more hearts align with truth, the resonance of Ma'at becomes louder than the noise of the world. This is the great return, not of gods from the sky, but of the God within. And to walk this path is not to look back with nostalgia, but to remember forward with purpose. Egypt is not a place. It is a frequency. The Neteru are not myths. They are mirrors. And when you see them clearly, you see yourself. You are the healer and the scribe. You are the warrior and the lover. You are the one who forgets and the one who remembers. And the Neteru? They are simply waiting for your signal. The moment you align, they return, not from elsewhere, but from within. The temples of ancient Egypt were not merely places of ritual. They were living instruments of transformation. Unlike modern places of worship designed for congregation and passive reverence, Egyptian temples were constructed as vibrational machines, each stone laid with precise intention, each chamber aligned to the stars, the elements, and the inner anatomy of the human soul. The ancients understood that space could shape consciousness. A temple was not only a house of the gods, it was a roadmap, a frequency tuner, a stairway for the initiate to ascend through levels of being. As one entered a temple, they entered a womb, a resonance chamber carefully calculated to guide the energy body through purification, calibration, and expansion. The outer courtyard represented the material world, the realm of chaos, the visible, the dualistic. Here, the initiate left behind the identity of the mundane self. With each threshold crossed deeper into the stone corridors, the energy shifted. Narrow passageways, sudden shafts of light, deep silence. The architecture wasn't for grandeur. It was to disorient the ego, to invite stillness, to reconfigure perception. What you felt in your body inside a temple was intentional. Every frequency was pre-designed. Temples were aligned not arbitrarily but astronomically. They pointed to the rising of Sirius, to the belt of Orion, to the solstices and equinoxes. The ancients didn't just look to the sky. They listened. They knew that stars emitted frequency, and when the temple aligned with those frequencies, it could receive transmissions. In essence, each sacred site acted as a kind of stellar receiver, tuned like an instrument to the cosmic symphony. The priests didn't invent this. They remembered it. The geometry of the structures was not decorative. It was sacred math in motion. The golden ratio, pi, the square root of 2, all these proportions were embedded into columns, chambers, staircases. Why? Because these proportions mirrored the structure of the cosmos and therefore the soul. When the physical body walked through spaces built with this geometry, the energetic body began to resonate with it, harmonizing thought, emotion, and spirit into alignment. Healing occurred not through medicine, but through resonance. The Temple of Luxor, for example, was built in the precise layout of the human body, head, torso, limbs. As initiates moved from room to room, they symbolically traveled through their own internal structure, cleansing and attuning each layer. The Temple of Dendera vibrated with the feminine mystery. Its carvings depicted sky maps, birthing chambers, goddesses crowned with stars. Abydos held the secret of resurrection. It was not just the burial site of Osiris. It was a frequency portal to the rebirth of consciousness. The entire structure pulsed with the essence of death as initiation, not ending. The most iconic of all, the Great Pyramid, was not built to house a body but to ignite one. To this day, we cannot replicate its precision. Each block placed with sub-millimeter accuracy, its chambers aligned with star shafts that point to Orion, Sirius, and Thuban. But the true mystery lies in what happens inside. Modern travelers speak of electromagnetic anomalies, shifts in consciousness, visions, altered perception. The king's chamber resonates at 440 Hz, the same frequency used in ancient chants. The note of A, the opening vibration of sound. The granite inside acts like a tuning fork. When sound is spoken within, the structure amplifies it. What happens is not physical, it is cellular, energetic, it reprograms, and yet no hieroglyphs adorn its interior. No decoration, no stories, no names. As if the pyramid says this space is not for distraction, it is for direct experience. The pyramid is not an object, it is a being, and within it the soul meets itself. The initiate lies in the sarcophagus not to die but to shed the old code. They breathe in darkness and silence until the inner eye opens, until they see not with the mind but with the memory of the stars. Every temple was built on ley lines, Earth's energetic meridians. The ancients knew how to read these currents, just as the body has acupuncture points. Sacred sites were placed on nodal points where Earth's magnetics were strongest, thinnest, or most receptive. The land itself dictated the location, and once chosen, the construction obeyed universal laws. Stones were brought not just from nearby, but from places that held specific vibrational signatures. Quartz, granite, limestone, all with crystalline structures capable of holding and amplifying frequency. Some temples even harnessed water flow beneath the ground to generate piezoelectric energy, natural power activated by pressure. These were not ruins, they were technologies. Ritual within these spaces was equally calculated. It wasn't performance. It was frequency orchestration. Incense burned not for scent, but for etheric cleansing. Chanting wasn't poetry, it was waveform tuning. Each syllable resonated with parts of the human subtle body. Sound could open chakras, dislodge trauma, align timelines. The priesthood were sonic engineers, gatekeepers of vibrational accuracy. And for the initiate, the temple wasn't a place you visited once. It was a map you walked again and again, each time deeper, more attuned. One didn't rush through. You might spend hours in silence before a single glyph waiting for it to speak. And it would. Symbols in Egypt were living frequencies. A glyph was a portal, a shape, a spell. When contemplated properly, it could rewire the brain, unlock memory, dissolve egoic distortion. Writing was not mere language, it was spell work. The priests and architects of these temples were trained over decades. Their understanding of architecture, astronomy, sound, and consciousness was not a theory. It was a lived reality. They didn't guess. They received. Through trance, dream work, and communion with the Neteru, they channeled blueprints. Every temple was built first in vision, then in stone, and because of this, the structures remain energetically active thousands of years later. Many believe the temples are sleeping, but that is not true. They are awake, they are waiting, and those who walk them with reverence feel it, not in the mind, but in the spine, in the breath, in the stillness. The walls may crumble, but the frequency remains. The codes are intact, wrapped in stone and time, whispering only to those who can hear. Today, as the veil between dimensions thins, more are hearing, more are remembering. The temples are not relics, they are instructions. They were never meant to be admired from a distance, but entered, felt, activated. They call to the soul that is ready to remember its blueprint. They call to the ones who carry ancient codes in modern bodies. And when you walk through them, not as a tourist but as a returning initiate, you do not just witness history. You enter a dialogue. You place your hand upon the wall and the stone responds. You speak a name, and the air stirs. You close your eyes and the inner light returns. The temple lives within you. You carry its geometry in your bones. And with every step you write new lines into your own temple of flesh. This is what the ancients knew. That the world is a mirror, that spirit takes form, that energy creates structure, and that the human being is the highest temple of all. In the world of ancient Egypt, death was never feared. It was anticipated, studied, revered, not because the people were morbid, but because they understood that death was not the end. It was the great transformation. The initiate did not prepare for death with dread, but with devotion. To the Egyptians, the death of the body was merely the shedding of a layer, the passage into a higher octave of existence. But more than this, the death they truly sought was the death of illusion, the death of ego, the death that births the soul into truth. Every great mystery school of Kemet prepared its disciples not for power or status, but for the long journey inward, to die before death, to meet the self beyond form, and to become a vessel through which the divine could move. Initiation was a spiritual science. It was not symbolic, it was deeply real. The process was not given, it was earned. The initiate had to pass through countless inner tests, tests of silence, solitude, purification, courage. To step into the sacred was to shed all masks. The gods did not receive the false self. Only the purified heart could walk through the inner gates. Temples such as those at Abydos, Edfu, and Karnak were not constructed for casual worship. They were stages of transformation, vibrational passageways where the soul would be dismantled and reconstructed. The journey was always the same: descent, dissolution, resurrection. The neophyte would begin by confronting their own shadows. The unintegrated fears, the inherited pain, the illusions of identity. One had to descend into the inner underworld, guided by symbols, protected by chants, and stripped of all safety. In these corridors, light meant nothing if the darkness was not embraced. The myth of Osiris was not simply a tale, it was a map. Osiris, torn to pieces by his brother Set, scattered across the land, represents the fragmented soul, shattered by trauma, buried in matter, lost in the illusion of separation. It is Isis, the divine feminine, who reassembles him, breathes life into him, and conceives Horus, the awakened self. This myth was not entertainment. It was instruction. The initiate must become Osiris, must descend, be broken, be remembered, and be reborn as Horus. The journey of resurrection was not about afterlife. It was about now. Inside the temples, rites were performed in absolute secrecy. The outer world knew only fragments. The inner chambers were veiled to all but the prepared. Inside, initiates lay in sarcophagi not to die but to dissolve. They entered altered states through sound, darkness, breath. They faced visions, past life echoes, soul contracts. The silence was total, the body still, the soul awake. It was not about belief. It was about experience, direct, undeniable contact with one's true nature beyond space and time. The ancient texts, such as the Book of the Dead, or more accurately, the Book of Coming Forth by Light, were not books of spells. They were vibrational guides. They instructed the soul how to navigate the afterlife, how to speak before the 42 judges, how to identify the names of gates and guardians, how to keep one's heart light as the feather of Ma'at. These teachings were embedded with sacred resonance. To read them aloud was to activate the soul's memory. To remember one's true name was to remember one's divine origin. In the great hall of judgment, the heart of the deceased would be placed on a scale, balanced against the feather of Ma'at. If the heart was heavy, with lies, regret, guilt, it would fall. If the heart was pure, light with truth, compassion, balance, it would rise. This was not superstition. It was soul physics. What we carry in our field echoes through dimensions. The lightness or density of the heart is a real vibration, and those who lived in Ma'at walked with a clarity that pierced illusion. But death was not reserved for the end of life. Every ritual was a rehearsal. Every initiation was a symbolic death. The more the soul could die to illusion, the more it could awaken to its eternal self. The ancient masters knew that only by dying to the false could one be reborn in truth. And so they practiced death, not in despair, but in reverence. They honored the transition not as loss, but as liberation. For the advanced initiate, the sarcophagus became not a coffin but a womb of light. Some spent 3 days within, fasting from the senses, entering deep states of awareness where the soul could roam. Some emerged forever changed, no longer ruled by mind, but guided by inner knowing. The body returned, but the being had shifted. The eyes held depth. The voice carried weight. The presence became undeniable. This is what made the ancient priesthood so revered. They had crossed the threshold. They were not speaking about spirit. They were living from it. And when they performed ceremonies, whether to call rain, heal disease, or align a king, they did so from the authority of remembrance. They did not guess. They knew. And yet the mystery was never meant to remain exclusive. Every soul was capable of this journey. Every heart held the potential for lightness. The teachings were hidden not to withhold them, but to protect their sanctity. They could not be given to the unready, for power without purity becomes distortion. But to the sincere seeker the path always opened. The temples whispered, the gods responded. This deep reverence for death shaped every aspect of Egyptian life. Tombs were not places of sorrow, but masterpieces of preparation. They were designed not for the body, but for the soul. Every color, every symbol, every object buried was a tool for the journey ahead. Even food and scent, Even music and sculpture were created to remind the soul where it came from and where it was returning. To die was to travel was to return, and to return was to awaken. In the final moments of physical life, the Egyptians believed the soul would separate gently, drawn toward the west, the land where the sun sets. But the west was not a place of loss. It was the portal to the infinite. The Ba, the personality soul, would fly free like a bird. The Ka, the life force, would return to the source, and the Ak, the transfigured spirit, would rise beyond time, luminous and whole. The journey was guided by ancestors, by gods, by memory, but most of all by the resonance of the heart. Those who lived in Ma'at walked easily. Those who carried distortion faced the tests. But even the tests were gifts. The universe was not cruel. It was precise. It gave each soul exactly what it needed to evolve. In this, the Egyptians remind us of a truth we've nearly forgotten, that death is not punishment. It is reflection, that the soul is not fragile. It is eternal, and that the most sacred act we can perform is to live in such a way that our death becomes a passage, not a rupture. Today, as we awaken to deeper truths, we find echoes of this ancient wisdom rising again. In near-death experiences, in dreams, in plant medicine journeys, in the silence of meditation, we meet the same guardians, the same light, the same knowing. And perhaps it is not new at all. Perhaps we are remembering. The temples may stand in silence. The rituals may seem buried, but the codes remain. In the air, in the stone, in the collective field. They call to us not to worship, but to become, not to kneel, but to embody. The journey never ended, it simply waited. And now, as the world begins to tremble, as the illusion of permanence shatters, the path opens once more. The question is not whether death awaits, it is whether we will meet it ready. And readiness does not come from belief, but from balance, from Ma'at, from the alignment of inner and outer, from a life lived not in fear but in remembrance. Before there were books, there were tablets. Before there were religions, there was knowing. And before the world was veiled in forgetfulness, there was Thoth, the scribe of the gods, the architect of sacred language, the guardian of time, the translator of divine mind into human form. Known by many names across epochs, Tehuti in Kemet, Hermes Trismegistus in Greece, he was never just a myth. He was a principle, a presence, a consciousness that encoded wisdom into light and sealed it in the earth until we were ready to remember. Thoth did not merely write. He breathed structure into creation. It was said that his words had the power to move mountains, to open portals, to heal the fractured soul. He did not speak from intellect, but from resonance. Every glyph, every symbol he inscribed carried a vibrational fingerprint, a geometric key that could unlock layers of the soul. He taught that thought creates reality, that vibration precedes matter, and that time is not linear but spiral, an unfolding song echoing from the center of all things. The emerald tablets attributed to him are among the most mysterious and enduring relics of esoteric wisdom. Not because of their age, though ancient they are. Not because of their beauty, though profound they remain. But because they transmit frequency beyond language. Those who read them do not merely receive information, they feel remembrance. The words awaken something dormant, something older than this life, something sacred and still humming in the depths of the soul. The teachings of Thoth are not philosophical. They are transformational. They speak of the unity of all things, of the inner sun that never sets, of the infinite within the finite. They do not demand belief. They invite inquiry. They point not to external salvation but to internal mastery. For Thoth did not come to create followers. He came to activate creators. He taught that the universe is mind, that all is energy in motion, and that to know the self is to know the all. His temples were not places of dogma, but laboratories of consciousness. Within their walls, geometry, sound, breath, and silence were used to shift perception and pierce the veils of illusion. He instructed his disciples to observe the stars not just as lights in the sky, but as reflections of inner archetypes. As above, so below. The macrocosm is the mirror of the microcosm. The gods in the heavens are patterns in the psyche, and to master one's own field is to harmonize with the cosmos. The emerald tablets speak of the hidden chambers beneath the pyramids, the halls of Amenti, where souls are healed and timelines rebalanced. Thoth speaks of immortality not as the refusal of death, but as the remembrance of essence. The body may perish, but the soul endures, carries memory, and returns in cycles to refine, to expand, to align. Reincarnation, in his view, is not punishment. It is opportunity. And time, rather than prison, is a tool, an initiatory spiral through which consciousness sharpens itself into light. Within the teachings is a path. Know thyself. Purify the heart. Master the will. Harmonize thought, emotion, and action. Then speak the word, for the word is power. The uttered vibration shapes form. This is the core of all magical traditions. The realization that intention aligned with voice can shift worlds. The ancients knew this. Thoth reminded them. To chant was to build. To whisper was to summon. To write was to crystallize vibration into permanence. But the deepest of his teachings lie hidden in silence. For the greatest truths cannot be spoken. They can only be felt, remembered, embodied. The tablets themselves are said to reside in interdimensional space, accessible not through excavation but through initiation. One does not find them with tools. One finds them with purity, with stillness, with readiness. Those who have entered deep states of meditation, trance, or altered perception have described seeing glowing green glyphs, symbols written not in ink, but in light. They speak of hearing not words, but tones that carry meaning. Some experience downloads, visions of ancient temples, star maps, geometric corridors of infinite light. These are not hallucinations. They are transmissions, fragments of the cosmic library reawakening as the soul vibrates at the matching frequency. It is said that Thoth never died, that he ascended, taking his knowledge into higher realms, yet leaving behind echoes encoded in the ether. He became a living field, a stream of consciousness that guides those who seek truth not for power but for balance. Many who work in sacred geometry, frequency healing, quantum physics, or metaphysical philosophy report spontaneous connection to this field. They receive ideas, formulas, languages they never studied. Not invention, but remembering. Thoth reminds us that the universe is a structure of mind. That thought aligned with heart becomes creation. That the observer is not separate from the observed, and that the key to all knowledge is within the self. His wisdom is not elitist, it is inclusive. Every being is capable of mastery, every soul carries the seed. And the tablets are not merely objects, they are archetypes of that seed waiting to unfold in awareness. In this time of global shift, many feel the call to ancient teachings. The symbols return, the words resurface, the tablets glow once more. Not because Thoth wishes to rule, but because humanity is ready to remember what it forgot in the rush of progress. We are beginning to look inward, to seek balance, to speak more carefully, to think with more depth, to listen to silence. And when we do, the field responds. The legacy of Thoth is not about the past. It is about potential. His voice lives in every moment we choose clarity over chaos, intention over reaction, truth over comfort, in every breath taken with awareness, in every creation born from coherence. He is not a figure in a book. He is the current beneath your thoughts when they align with source. The emerald tablets may never be touched, but they can be felt, and that is the true transmission. not of history but of frequency, not to be stored but lived. You do not need to understand it all. You only need to remember what is yours to carry. Long before Egypt was Egypt, before temples rose and pyramids reached into the stars, there was another land, a land of light and resonance, where the spiritual and the scientific were one. The memory of this place lingers in myths, in dreams, in the silent pull felt by seekers who look to the stars and feel homesick. The land was called Atlantis, and though history denies it, the soul remembers. Atlantis was not a myth to the ancient Egyptians. It was a memory encoded in their teachings, a silent thread that ran through the lineage of their wisdom. The priests of Kemet spoke of Zep-Tepi, the first time when gods walked with men. These gods were not separate deities but advanced beings, keepers of knowledge, masters of frequency, architects of worlds. Many came from the stars, and some, it is said, were survivors of Atlantis. When Atlantis fell, not in an instant but in a series of cataclysms, its high priests and initiates journeyed across the earth to preserve their knowledge. Some traveled to the Andes, some to the Himalayas, and some followed the Nile to what would become Egypt. There, in alignment with the river and the stars, they began again, not as rulers but as seeders, planting fragments of their understanding into temples, geometry, symbols, and stone. These fragments would become the foundation of Kemet. This is why the oldest structures in Egypt are often the most advanced. The Great Pyramid, for example, predates the dynastic pharaohs. Its construction defies explanation even today. It is as though it was placed, not built, etched into the earth as a marker of celestial precision. The same can be said of the Osirian at Abydos, with its megalithic stones and unexplained antiquity. These are not the remnants of primitive civilizations. They are the fingerprints of a forgotten mastery. Atlantean knowledge was not about control. It was about alignment, understanding how thought shapes form, how sound opens gateways, how geometry creates consciousness. They knew that the human being is a multidimensional vessel, capable of incredible expansion. They taught that the stars are not distant fires, but nodes of intelligence. That planets are not just rocks, but teachers. That the universe is a living network of awareness, and that Earth is part of something much greater. Many of these teachings were preserved in Egypt's priesthood. They spoke of Sirius, the star of Isis, as a home of their ancestors, of Orion's belt, which mirrored the pyramids of Giza, as the resting place of Osiris, of the Pleiades, which influenced the sacred feminine lineages. These weren't poetic associations, they were star maps, references to real alignments both in the sky and in the soul. Initiates were taught to travel not just in body but in consciousness. Through breath, geometry, sound, and stillness, they could leave the confines of the physical and access star realms. They did not call it astral projection or remote viewing. It was simply communion. And in those states they received instructions on healing, on technology, on harmony. These communications weren't fantasies, they were real, and they formed the backbone of Egypt's spiritual science. Over time, as the outer world grew denser, much of this knowledge was hidden. The temples were sealed, the star languages went quiet, but the codes remained in glyphs, in proportions, in rituals passed down through whispers and bloodlines. The initiate had to find the way back. The path was never lost, only veiled. And now, in our time, the veil thins. More people remember, more are drawn to ancient symbols without knowing why. They dream of Egypt, of stars, of languages they've never spoken. They see repeating numbers, they feel time differently. They sense that they are not from here, not fully. This is not imagination, it is awakening. The same call that stirred the souls of the ancients stirs now in the hearts of those ready to realign. The galactic legacy of Egypt is not about aliens descending from ships. It is about consciousness ascending through frequency. It is about remembering that you are not your body, your name, or your story. You are a thread in a vast tapestry, woven across stars, incarnations, and dimensions. You are a library of light walking, a voice of memory waking up. And as you wake, the earth responds. The temples reawaken, the symbols activate. The energy lines of the planet begin to hum again. It is not nostalgia, it is prophecy. The ancients knew this time would come, a time of great unraveling and great remembering, a time when the children of light would return, not to repeat, but to restore. You are not here by chance. You carry codes that were seeded before time was counted. You are the continuation of the great experiment, the rebirth of the Atlantean dream in a new octave, the living bridge between sky and soil. And Egypt? Egypt is the mirror. When you gaze upon the Sphinx, when you enter the pyramid, when you trace the eye of Horus with your fingers, you are not learning. You are remembering. The stars look back. The sand knows your name, and the wind carries your breath to the stones that once held your voice. This is the hidden legacy, not myth, not history. But you. The sands may have buried the temples. The names of pharaohs may have faded, but what was built in resonance still echoes through time. Egypt is not gone. It is not history. It is a vibration, and that vibration is rising again. Not in ruins, but in you. You do not need to cross oceans to walk within sacred walls. The temple is within. Every breath you take in silence, every word spoken in truth, every act made in awareness is a return to Ma'at. The ancient path does not demand that you wear linen or read hieroglyphs. It asks only that you remember. And remembering is a spiritual technology in itself. To live as the ancients lived is not to imitate, but to align. They taught not through dogma, but through structure. The structure of frequency, the rhythm of the earth, the balance between shadow and light. Their rituals were blueprints. Their symbols were codes. Their myths were multidimensional maps for waking the soul. The gods of Egypt never needed followers. They were never meant to be worshipped from a distance. They were meant to be embodied. Hathor is still singing in every act of beauty and joy. Anubis still guides every soul through transition and inner death. Sekhmet burns away falsehood wherever truth dares to emerge. Thoth still whispers in moments of inspired clarity, in symbols drawn unconsciously, in dreams that speak louder than words. The eye of Horus does not watch you from the sky. It opens within you the moment you see with the soul. That is the new activation. Not ancient power revived, but eternal power remembered. We live in a time of acceleration. Everything is speeding up. Time collapses, illusions break down, and the soul, long buried beneath noise, begins to rise again. The teachings of Kemet were not just for then. They are for now, especially now. The wisdom of Egypt can help us rebuild a world that has forgotten balance. It teaches us that architecture is sacred, that sound is medicine, that intention shapes energy, and that every human is a vessel for light or distortion. The ancients knew that civilization without spirit is empty, that knowledge without Ma'at is destructive, that humanity, when disconnected from source, becomes lost in its own reflection. But the inverse is also true. When even one person returns to Ma'at, to harmony, to truth, to coherence, the entire field shifts. We begin to vibrate clarity into the grid. We begin to awaken codes in others. This is the silent revolution, the return of the living temple, not built of stone, but of spirit. And so, the temples rise again, not in stone, but in breath, not in hieroglyphs, but in memory, not in rituals performed by priests, but in lives lived with sacred presence. You are the scribe. You are the builder, you are the initiate and the teacher, you are the one who forgot and the one who now remembers. Egypt is not behind you, it is within you, and it is rising. Now is the time. Speak the names again, Walk the inner halls. Let the light return. There are those among us who feel it, not as a thought, but as a pull, a deep, invisible magnetism that moves through the spine when certain symbols are seen, certain words spoken, certain places remembered without explanation. It is not nostalgia. It is not fantasy. It is memory beyond time. And those who feel it have a name. Starseeds. The ancient Egyptians would not have used this word, but they understood its meaning. They believed that not all souls originated on Earth, that some arrived here from other realms, other dimensions, other stars, not to dominate, but to assist, to plant light and density, to serve as bridges between heaven and soil. They called these beings Netjaru when divine, and Aku when luminous, but they also recognized their human forms, those who carried a quiet knowing, an ancient sadness, a relentless yearning to return to something they could not name. Starseeds do not awaken through logic. They awaken through resonance. A temple, a sound, a night sky, an eye in a dream. And often this awakening is preceded by suffering, isolation, disconnection. The feeling of not belonging in this world because in truth they do not. Their home is elsewhere, and yet they chose to be here, not as punishment but as purpose. The wisdom of ancient Egypt is uniquely suited to awaken these souls, because Egypt was not only a civilization, it was a landing pad, a harmonic frequency on Earth designed to hold high light codes in dense form. The temples, symbols, and geometry weren't made just for humans. They were messages to those who came from the stars, encoded transmissions waiting to be unlocked not by intellect but by vibration. This is why so many feel a magnetic pull to Egypt. They do not understand it, but they cannot deny it. They dream of golden corridors, of chants they've never heard, of suns that do not burn. They see the eye of Horus and something in their chest stirs. They hear the name Thoth and feel the outline of another lifetime forming behind their breath. It is not imagination. It is the call of the soul, the emerald tablets, the book of coming forth by light, the solar bark of Ra. These are not just texts or myths. They are living codes designed to awaken cellular memory in star-born souls. The Akashic fields of Kemet are still active. When a starseed reads these words, the codes vibrate. The ancient energy finds a match. The temple lights up within. And what is awakened is not always beautiful at first. Many starseeds feel overwhelmed by their sensitivity, their inability to adapt to modern society. They absorb too much, feel too deeply, speak a language of frequency in a world obsessed with noise. But this dissonance is not a flaw. It is a sign. They are not here to fit in. They are here to recalibrate reality. Egypt teaches them how. Not through dogma, but through design. The breathwork of Ankh, the sacred life current, the geometry of temples, a map of multidimensional anatomy, the Netjeru, as archetypes for stabilizing cosmic frequencies in human form, the rituals as recalibration ceremonies for the energetic body, and the myth of Isis and Osiris as a personal journey from fragmentation to wholeness. The Eye of Horus is not just a protective talisman, it is the symbol of a fully awakened perception. The merging of right and left, male and female, light and shadow. The starseed carries this potential. When their eye opens, they do not just see truth, they become it. The awakening of a starseed is not loud. It is subtle, like a ripple moving across ancient still water. It begins with symbols, synchronicities, and an inner knowing that life is not as it seems. They may be drawn to sacred geometry without knowing why. They may sketch spirals or speak in tonal sounds. They are not remembering from books. They are remembering from the soul's deep vault. Ancient Egypt becomes a mirror. Its carvings, alignments, and teachings were designed to awaken this remembering, not just of Earth's past, but of the cosmos. Egypt encoded a galactic legacy. The story of Ra journeying through the underworld was not just a myth of the sun. It was a map of consciousness traveling through the void. The Jed pillar was not merely symbolic. It represented the spinal column, the ascension path of the Kundalini. And the weighing of the heart was not about morality. It was about frequency. Starseeds feel this. They know that the old stories were not literal. They were portals. And through these portals they begin to rise. As their memories return, so too does their mission, not in a dramatic revelation, but in a slow, graceful unfolding. They remember they came not to escape the earth, but to help transmute it. They are frequency holders, vibrational architects. Some are here to teach, others to heal, others to simply anchor peace in a chaotic world. Their power does not lie in fame, but in frequency, in presence, in intention. Egypt reminds them that they do not need to fight for their place. They were always meant to be here. Their sensitivity is a gift, not a weakness. Their empathy is a tool, not a flaw. They carry the blueprint of civilizations that once honored spirit and form, that understood that everything is energy. The temples were schools, the symbols were frequencies, and the gods were guides, not rulers but reflections. As they awaken, many starseeds begin to dream differently. The dreams are vivid, symbolic, almost instructional. They see staircases, temples, light codes, beings with elongated skulls and eyes that see through time. They begin to speak words they do not recognize. They see themselves in robes, in gold, in silence. This is not fantasy. It is memory surfacing from lifetimes stored in the multidimensional layers of the soul. They also begin to feel timelines collapsing. What once felt like a past life begins to bleed into now. They sense that the veils are thinning, that their purpose is no longer someday, but now. And in this urgency, they begin to seek others. Not to form hierarchy, but harmony. Starseeds find each other by resonance. They meet, and the space shifts. The silence deepens. The remembrance accelerates. Egyptian wisdom teaches that true power is quiet, that the most aligned beings do not shout but radiate, that Ma'at is not defended, it is lived. Starseeds begin to embody this. They become temples in motion. They speak less, but their presence speaks volumes. They do not debate truth. They become it, not by force, but by coherence, and in doing so, they reawaken the grid. Every starseed who returns to balance activates light in the collective field. Every breath taken in stillness, every symbol remembered with reverence, every word spoken with clarity, ripples outward. The earth itself responds. The dormant codes embedded in the land begin to hum again. The temples vibrate, even when silent. The past and future fold into presence. This is the return of the ancient ones, not as deities descending, but as humans remembering. The eye reopens, the voice of the soul grows louder, and Egypt, the mother of spiritual architecture, rises not from the desert, but from within. You who feel out of place, you are not broken. You are ancient. You who dream of stars, you are not escaping. You are returning. You who feel too much, you are here to restore balance. You who see beyond, you are here to reweave the light. The teachings of Kemet were never lost. They were stored, not in museums, but in the soul. And now, as the frequencies rise, they come back, not to the mind, but to the body, not to be studied, but lived. You are the key. You are the code, and the temple is no longer stone. It is you,